The early morning sun cast long shadows across the Nevada desert as Dr. Samantha Hayes studied the unusual readings on her seismograph. For the third time this week, the equipment had detected something that shouldn't exist: rhythmic vibrations emanating from nearly 2 miles beneath the Earth's surface. "This can't be right," she muttered, adjusting her protective helmet strap. The abandoned mining complex stretched out before her, its weathered structures standing like ancient sentinels against the harsh landscape. 20 years ago, this had been one of the world's most productive copper mines. Now it was nothing more than a testament to human ambition gone bust, or so everyone thought. Dr. Hayes, the voice of her research assistant, Raj Patel, crackled through her radio. "You need to see this. We found something in Shaft 7. Samantha grabbed her equipment bag and headed toward the mine entrance. The familiar scent of damp earth and mineral deposits greeted her as she descended into the darkness. Her footsteps echoed off the reinforced walls, each step taking her deeper into the earth's embrace. Raj waited for her at the junction of 2 tunnels, his dark eyes wide with excitement. "The drilling team hit something at the bottom of the new bore shaft. It's like nothing we've ever seen before." They took the service elevator down, the ancient mechanism groaning under their weight. As they descended, Samantha's instruments began to react more strongly. The rhythmic patterns she detected from the surface were clearer now, almost like a heartbeat. The bottom of the shaft opened into a recently excavated chamber. Portable lights cast harsh shadows across the rough-hewn walls. What caught Samantha's attention, however, was the exposed section of perfectly smooth dark metal that shouldn't exist 2 miles underground. "We found it about an hour ago," Raj explained, leading her closer. "The material isn't responding to any of our standard tests. It's not magnetic, doesn't conduct electricity, and seems to absorb all direct light." Samantha approached the exposed section, her hand trembling slightly as she reached out to touch it. The surface was warm, warmer than it should be at this depth. As her fingers made contact, a subtle vibration pulsed through her arm. "Get me the ground-penetrating radar," she ordered, never taking her eyes off the anomaly. "And contact the university. They need to know what we found." Within hours, the small chamber had transformed into a hub of activity. Additional equipment arrived, along with more researchers. The initial scans revealed what they'd found was merely the tip of something massive, a structure that extended deeper into the earth and spread out in all directions. "This is incredible," Dr. William Thompson, the head of their department, breathed as he studied the preliminary data. "The structure appears to be roughly spherical, approximately 1 kilometer in diameter. But these readings, they suggest it's hollow." Samantha nodded, pointing to her seismic data. "The vibrations we've been detecting. They're coming from inside. Whatever this is, it's active." As if in response to her words, a low hum began to emanate from the exposed section. The metal surface shifted from its dark, light-absorbing state to a deep, iridescent blue. Patterns began to emerge, intricate designs that seemed to flow and change like liquid. "Everyone out," Samantha shouted, but her voice was drowned out by a sudden, deafening tone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The chamber's lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness broken only by the now pulsing glow of the alien surface. In the chaos that followed, as researchers scrambled for the elevator, Samantha stood transfixed. The patterns on the surface had begun to form what looked like writing, symbols that shifted and changed too quickly to document. But one thing was clear: they had awakened something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Within 24 hours, the site was swarming with military personnel. High-ranking officials from various government agencies arrived, along with specialists in fields Samantha had never heard of. The small research team that had made the discovery found themselves caught in a whirlwind of debriefings and non-disclosure agreements. Dr. Hayes, a stern-faced military officer, addressed her as she sat in a hastily constructed command center near the mine entrance. "I'm Colonel Marcus Bishop. We need you to tell us everything you know about what's down there." Samantha looked down at her data tablets, then back at the Colonel. "What's down there, Colonel, is proof that we're not alone in the universe. And I think it's trying to communicate with us." The Colonel's expression remained neutral, but his knuckles widened as he gripped the edge of the table. "Communicate? What makes you say that?" Before she could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the complex. On the monitors showing the chamber below, the exposed metal surface had begun to move, seeming to flow like mercury. The rhythmic vibrations that had first drawn Samantha's attention now shook the entire facility. As they watched in stunned silence, a section of the wall began to part, revealing a darkness deeper than any cave. And from that darkness came a soft, pulsing light, and something else, something that would change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe forever. The discovery in the Nevada desert wasn't just the beginning of a new chapter in human history. It was the end of our solitude as a species, and the start of a journey that would take humanity to places we never imagined possible. But first, we had to face what lay buried beneath the earth, and hope we were ready for what we'd awakened. 3 days after the initial discovery, Samantha found herself leading a joint civilian-military expedition into what they now knew was an entrance chamber. The alien metal had reformed into a perfectly circular doorway, beyond which stretched a corridor that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "Structural integrity is holding at 100%, Raj reported, checking his instruments as they prepared to enter. "Air quality is perfect, almost too perfect." Commander Diana Reeves, the Special Forces officer assigned to their team, checked her tactical gear one final time. "Remember, no one touches anything without authorization. Dr. Hayes, you take point with me. Dr. Patel, you're with Lieutenant Jackson. The rest of you maintain formation." The team of 12 force scientists and 8 military personnel crossed the threshold. Their boots clicked against a surface that looked like obsidian but felt warm and slightly yielding. The walls pulsed with faint lines of blue-green light, providing just enough illumination to see. "The architecture is responding to our presence," Samantha observed, watching as the lights brightened slightly ahead of them while dimming behind. "It's almost like it's leading us somewhere," Diana finished, her grip tightening on her weapon. The corridor descended in a gentle spiral, taking them deeper into the earth. Traditional navigation equipment had stopped working the moment they entered, but their modified sensors indicated they had traveled nearly half a kilometer down when they reached another chamber. This room was vast, its ceiling lost in darkness above them. Geometric structures that resembled computer terminals lined the walls, their surfaces beginning to glow as the team approached. In the center stood a column of shifting light that reached up into the darkness. "This is incredible," Lieutenant Jackson breathed, forgetting protocol for a moment. "It's like nothing we've ever seen in any ancient Earth civilization." "Because it's not from Earth," Samantha replied, approaching one of the terminal-like structures. The surface rippled at her proximity, symbols appearing and floating just above it. "This technology, it's not just advanced, it's alive." A low hum filled the chamber, different from the rhythmic vibrations they detected earlier. This sound seemed to resonate within their bodies, making several team members shift uncomfortably. "Dr. Hayes," Raj called out, his voice tight with concern. "The energy readings, they're spiking. Whatever this place is, it's waking up more with each passing minute." Diana moved closer to Samantha, her training warring with her curiosity. "Can you make any sense of these symbols? They're similar to what we saw above, but more structured. There's a pattern." Samantha's voice trailed off as she noticed something. "Look at how they're arranging themselves. It's like..." Before she could finish, the column of light in the center of the room pulsed brilliantly. The symbols on every surface began to move more rapidly, streaming like rivers of light across the walls. A voice, if it could be called that, filled their minds rather than their ears. The team instinctively drew closer together as the light from the central column expanded, washing over them in waves. Several soldiers raised their weapons, but Diana held up a hand. Hold your fire. No hostile action. It's scanning us, Samantha realized, watching as the light seemed to linger on each person before moving on. It's trying to understand what we are. Suddenly, the light retracted violently, and the symbols on the walls turned from blue to a deep, pulsing red. New symbols appeared, these ones sharp and urgent-looking. The chamber shuddered, and dust fell from the unseen ceiling. The terminal surfaces began to crack, light bleeding through like golden blood. "We need to move now," Diana ordered, but Samantha stood transfixed by the changing symbols. "Wait," she called out. "It's trying to tell us something else, something about why it's here." The next tremor knocked several team members off their feet. The light column had begun to fragment, sending arcs of energy crackling across the chamber. "Dr. Hayes," Diana grabbed Samantha's arm. "We need to go." But as they turned to retreat, they found their exit had sealed. New corridors had opened in the chamber walls, leading deeper into the facility. The voice returned, now carrying an unmistakable tone of urgency. "Containment failing. Entity awakening. Choose, deeper or death." The team looked at each other, the reality of their situation sinking in. They were now trapped inside an alien facility built to contain something so dangerous its makers had buried it miles beneath the Earth's surface. And whatever it was waking up. Diana checked her tactical display, though it showed nothing but static. "Dr. Hayes, you're the expert here. Deeper or death? What's your call?" Samantha looked at the newly opened corridors, each pulsing with a different colored light. Whatever lay ahead would change humanity forever, if they survived to tell anyone about it. "We go deeper," she decided. "We need to know what we've awakened." As they chose a corridor and began their descent, none of them noticed the small silvery particles that had begun to float through the air, or the way these particles seemed to follow them, drawn to their bodies like moths to flame. The facility had recognized them as human, but it hadn't told them everything about what that meant. The truth waited below, in the darkness that had held its secrets for millions of years, and it was finally ready to share them. The chosen corridor led them through a series of chambers, each more bizarre than the last. The silvery particles in the air had become dense enough to notice, swirling around them like microscopic galaxies. Samantha's skin tingled where they made contact, and she noticed other team members unconsciously rubbing their arms and faces. "These particles," Raj said, examining his tablet's readings, "they're not just floating. They're organizing themselves, like a neural network forming in real time." Lieutenant Jackson swabbed his sleeve where the particles had settled. "Should we be concerned about contamination? Enhanced communication?" Diana's hand moved to her weapon. "Dr. Hayes, what does that mean?" Samantha felt a sudden pressure in her head, like the moment before a migraine. Around her, others winced and grabbed their temples. The silvery particles began to glow, creating a web of light that connected all team members. I can feel what you're thinking," Raj gasped, staring at Samantha. "Not words exactly, but impressions, emotions," Samantha finished. The shared consciousness was overwhelming but not uncomfortable. She could sense Diana's rigid military discipline warring with fascination, Jackson's barely contained fear, Raj's boundless curiosity. A new tremor shook the facility, stronger than before. Through their newly formed connection, they all felt it, something massive stirring below them. Something ancient, something aware. They pressed forward, now moving with unexpected coordination. The shared consciousness made them function as a single unit, anticipating each other's movements. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that defied comprehension. The space stretched out for what seemed like miles, filled with towering crystalline structures that pulsed with internal light. At the center, suspended in a column of swirling energy, was something that made their merged minds recoil in collective awe. It was massive, its form constantly shifting between states of matter. One moment it appeared solid, with a crystalline structure that mimicked the chambers around it. The next, it was liquid, flowing and reshaping itself. Then it would become like plasma, crackling with energy. That's what this facility was built to contain, Samantha whispered, though she didn't need to speak aloud anymore. They all understood. Through their shared consciousness, knowledge began to flow. The facility was feeding them information, preparing them. They saw flashes of an ancient war between civilizations so advanced they could reshape reality itself. They saw the entity, a weapon created to evolve endlessly, to adapt to any threat, to survive at any cost. It was too powerful. Diana received the knowledge with military precision. They couldn't destroy it, so they contained it, buried it on a primitive world. Earth, Raj completed. They chose Earth because a final tremor rocked the chamber, and the containment field began to fail. The entity's movements became more purposeful, more aware. Through their linked minds, they felt its consciousness awakening, vast and alien, and hungry for the millennia it had lost. The silvery particles suddenly blazed with light. Knowledge flooded their minds, not just information now, but understanding. The facility hadn't just been containing the entity, it had been waiting for a species to evolve that could inherit its purpose. The human brain, Samantha realized, the knowledge crystallizing in her mind and spreading to the others. Our neuroplasticity, our ability to adapt and change. We're compatible. The entity was fully awake now, its form stabilizing into something that hurt to look at directly. It regarded them with senses they couldn't comprehend. Through their shared consciousness, they understood the choice before them. The facility had prepared humanity's representatives for this moment. They could attempt to establish a new containment protocol, joining their minds more fully with the facility's systems, or they could run, leaving the entity free to emerge into a world that had no defense against it. We don't have much time. Diana's thought cut through the chaos. Dr. Hayes, what are we dealing with here? Samantha stepped forward, feeling the other's presence supporting her through their link. The entity turned its attention to her, and she felt the weight of eons pressing against her mind. It's not just a weapon, she shared her understanding. It's the key to understanding the universe itself. But its power is too great for any single species to control. That's why the facility chose us. Not as guards, but as students. The entity pulsed, sending waves of information crashing through their linked minds. Images of possibilities, both wonderful and terrible, cascaded through their shared consciousness. The choice they made here would determine not just their fate, but the fate of humanity itself. The countdown in their minds reached 0, and the chamber filled with light so bright it existed in dimensions they had never seen before. The moment of truth had arrived, and with it, the real meaning of their discovery buried beneath the earth. They weren't here to contain something. They were here to become something more. In the blinding light of the chamber, Samantha felt her consciousness expanding beyond anything human minds were meant to experience. The entity's presence filled every corner of their shared awareness, its ancient knowledge threatening to overwhelm them. Hold the link, she projected to her team, feeling their minds straining to maintain cohesion. We need to stay together. The silvery particles that had connected them now formed a glowing web throughout the chamber, creating a bridge between human consciousness and the entity's vast awareness. Through this connection, they began to understand what the facility's creators had truly intended. It's not just about containment. Raj's thoughts rippled through their shared mind space. It's about evolution. They watched through the entity's memories as civilizations rose and fell across the galaxy. Each one had discovered the entity, attempted to control its power, and ultimately failed. But humanity was different. The facility had recognized something unique in human consciousness, a flexibility, an adaptability that other species lacked. Diana's military training provided an unexpected anchor for their merged minds. It's like a tactical merger, she projected. We're not trying to control it. We're trying to collaborate. The entity's form continued to shift and flow, but now its movements seemed less chaotic, more purposeful. Through their enhanced perception, they could see it was responding to their thoughts, adapting its own vast consciousness to match their human understanding. Lieutenant Jackson, who had been quietly processing the situation, suddenly projected a realization that echoed through their shared awareness. It's teaching us how to evolve. The facility's systems pulsed with confirmation. The silvery particles began to coalesce into more complex patterns, forming structures that mirrored both human neural pathways and the entity's alien consciousness. They were becoming something new, not quite human, not quite alien, but a bridge between worlds. Samantha felt her understanding expanding exponentially. The mathematics of reality itself became clear, not just the physics they had known, but layers upon layers of deeper truths. She saw how the entity had been designed to be the ultimate repository of universal knowledge, but its power had driven its original creators to fear and ultimately attempt to contain it. But we're not containing it, she projected to the others. We're becoming part of it, and it's becoming part of us. Through their shared consciousness, they began to grasp the facility's true purpose. It wasn't a prison. It was an incubator, waiting for a species capable of forming a true symbiosis with the entity. The silvery particles weren't just tools for communication. They were the beginning of a transformation. The chamber itself began to change, its crystalline structures reshaping themselves to accommodate their evolving awareness. As their understanding grew, so did their ability to perceive the facility's deeper functions. What had appeared alien and incomprehensible now seemed elegant and logical. They're going to try to stop this, Diana projected, her tactical mind already racing ahead. When we don't return, they'll come looking. They'll try to take control. She was right. Through their enhanced perception, they could already sense the activity above. More military forces arriving, scientists setting up equipment, all of them trying to understand what was happening below. We need to make a decision, Samantha thought. We can't let this power be controlled or weaponized. But we also can't hide it forever. The entity pulsed with what they now recognized as agreement. It had spent eons waiting for this moment, not for freedom, but for partnership. Through their connection, it shared visions of possibility. Humanity evolving beyond its current limitations, reaching out to the stars not as conquerors or victims, but as guides. Raj's consciousness flickered with sudden insight. That's why it had to be buried so deep, not to keep it in, but to keep it safe until we were ready. The transformation was accelerating now. The silvery particles had become part of their cellular structure, changing them in ways that both thrilled and terrified. They could feel their collective consciousness expanding, touching minds far above, beginning to understand how to bridge the gap between what humanity was and what it could become. But with this power came responsibility. Through the entity's memories, they saw how other civilizations had destroyed themselves by reaching too far, too fast. They would need to proceed carefully, to guide humanity's evolution rather than force it. We need to show them, Samantha projected, forming a plan in their shared consciousness. Not tell them, not force them, but show them what's possible. The entity's response rippled through their minds like a wave of light. It had waited millions of years for this moment. It could wait a little longer to do things right. As their transformation continued, the facility began to reshape itself around them, preparing for the next phase. They weren't just discovering humanity's next step. They were becoming it. Above them, the world waited, unaware that beneath the Earth's surface, humanity's future was rising, one consciousness at a time. The first contact with the surface came not through words or signals, but through dreams. Every person within a 10-mile radius of the facility began experiencing shared visions, glimpses of possibility that left them changed upon waking. It's working, Samantha projected through their expanded consciousness. They're beginning to understand. The military camp above had descended into controlled chaos. Soldiers and scientists alike found themselves connected to something larger than themselves, their minds touching the edges of what Samantha and her team had become. Through the facility's systems, they could sense the ripples of change spreading outward. Colonel Bishop, who had been coordinating the surface operation, stood in the command center, his hands pressed against his temples. Like everyone else, he could feel the gentle pressure of foreign thoughts, of possibilities too vast to ignore. "We need to control this," one of his advisors insisted, but even as the words left his mouth, he felt their futility. Below, Samantha and her transformed team began their ascent. The entity moved with them, no longer contained but integrated into their collective consciousness. The silvery particles that had changed them now filled the facility's corridors, turning the walls into flowing rivers of light. "They're afraid," Diana sensed, feeling the surface team's reactions. "We need to show them they don't need to be." Raj's consciousness reached out, touching the minds of the scientists above. Through him, they began to understand the mathematics of their transformation, the pure logic behind what many had assumed was an invasion or attack. Lieutenant Jackson focused on the soldiers, sharing the tactical advantages of enhanced consciousness. "Not for war, but for peace. Show them what we can become," he projected, "not what we can destroy." As they approached the surface, the facility began to change. Walls became transparent, then permeable. The boundary between inside and outside, like the boundary between self and other, became fluid and negotiable. The entity, now fully integrated with their consciousness, shared its ancient knowledge more clearly. They saw the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations, the long wait for a species capable of true partnership. Humanity's gift wasn't just its neural plasticity. It was its ability to adapt, to change, to grow beyond its limitations without losing its essential nature. "We're ready," Samantha projected, as they reached the original entrance chamber. The surface team waited, weapons drawn but minds open to the new reality they could all feel approaching. Colonel Bishop stood at the front, his consciousness touched by the same visions that had affected everyone else. When Samantha and her team emerged, they were both more and less than human. The silvery particles had transformed them into beings of light and matter, their consciousness expanded but their humanity intact. Through them, the entity expressed itself not as a weapon or a threat, but as a teacher. "We understand now," Colonel Bishop said, lowering his weapon. "But how do we proceed?" Samantha's response came not in words but in shared understanding. The transformation couldn't be forced or rushed. Humanity would need to choose its own path forward, to evolve at its own pace. They would serve as guides, showing the way but never compelling. The entity's knowledge would be shared gradually, allowing human consciousness to adapt and grow naturally. The facility would remain, not as a containment center, but as a place of learning and transformation for those who were ready. It was never about power, Samantha shared with all of them. It was about potential. In the days that followed, the world began to change, not with violence or chaos, but with understanding. Dreams spread across continents, touching minds and opening them to new possibilities. The transformation that had begun beneath the earth continued, not as an invasion from above or below, but as an evolution from within. The entity that they had feared would destroy them instead taught them to rebuild themselves. The weapon that could have ended worlds helped them to save their own. And beneath the earth, in chambers of living crystal and flowing light, humanity began its longest journey, not to the stars above, but to the potential within. "We are becoming," Samantha shared with all who could hear. "And what we become is up to us." The story of what was buried beneath the earth became not an ending, but a beginning. And in the desert night, beneath stars that no longer seemed so far away, humanity dreamed of what it could become, one consciousness at a time. The silvery particles continued to spread, carried on the wind, and in dreams, waiting for those ready to take the next step. And in the facility deep below, the entity that had waited millions of years finally found what it had been seeking, not subjects or servants, but partners in the greatest journey of all. The journey of becoming more than we are, while remaining everything we were meant to be. End.